All right, welcome back, everybody. I know lots of people are trying to check out, so I'm sure people will trickle in, but I'd like to introduce John, our last speaker for the conference. And John has over 35 years of healthcare experience and is the Regional Vice President of PFC USA. He received 8.5 months of leadership training in the U.S. Army, achieving the rank of Sergeant Second and First Lieutenant and Captain. In this session, Success Tips for New Leaders, please give John the warmest welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Awesome. Thank you. So how many first-time leaders in the room? Raise your hand. How many folks who are not in a leadership position, raise your hand? Okay. So how many in here are in a leadership position and you've been in one more than 4 years? Okay, thank you, because that's going to help me tailor. This is for new leaders, but I'm going to ask one more question. How many of you have leadership training programs in your organizations? Awesome, awesome. About 30%. That's great. You know, what I've found throughout my career, pretty much other than the military, every organization that I went into did not have a leadership program. And it's like that in a good part of healthcare and outside of healthcare, which is horrible, right? Because typically we take a rising star in a department, and because they do such a great job as an individual, and we promote them up to supervisor. And then we do nothing. And we set them up for failure. And so if you think about Adam's presentation earlier, so a lot of those skills and those things, you know, when you look at, we don't provide them, right? Because leadership, you're not born a leader. Anybody can be a leader. The military proves that. It's kind of interesting, a little bit of statistic before we get started. In the corporate world, the average age before somebody in a leadership position actually gets leadership training, they're typically director level and they're about late 30s. Think about that. So you've progressed all those years probably being a bad leader, right? And so I'm going to help try to counteract that. Now, think about the military. So before you become a sergeant or just when you're promoted to sergeant, you're probably about early 20s. See the dynamic and the difference? They sent me off to a whole month at a residence course. And you learn your military skills because you're going to be a leader, so you need to be super proficient in those because you're leading others. But it was all about management and leadership as well, not just leading. And during that class, not only did you have a senior instructor who's constantly watching and grading you, you were in a position of leading the platoon, your group, and also being a follower. And you never knew when you're going to be in that position. And so as part of the course rating, the instructor rated you, but so did your peers. And so think about that kind of a dynamic that the military provides that young, and then the corporate world, we do nothing. And so think about how powerful that could be if in your organizations, if you don't have a training program, if you had one. So these are the learning objectives. We're going to skip over these because this is a much more mature leadership audience. So the reality of leadership, right? When you had your first leadership position, did you realize you're going to struggle? No? Did you realize ahead of time it was going to be a struggle? No, I thought it was going to be a breeze, right? Even after that month-long of training, I thought it was going to, oh, I got this. Not. It's a lot more difficult. You don't know what to expect, right? And as a rising star, whether in a company or otherwise, you know, you're not used to failure. In leadership, you fail a lot as you learn, correct? Especially if you don't have the skills and guidance. Mental stress. Don't go into a leadership position because you think you're going to work less hours. It doesn't work that way, right? You work more. And I figured out that moving from an E4 to an E5, I actually from an hour perspective, I was actually getting paid the same, but with a lot more responsibility. So you don't get paid extra, really. And what's interesting now is you have to pay attention not only to the demands and needs of your team, your boss as well, right? Before, I was just responsible for me. I just need to perform and be a good team member. And now I've got 2 different bosses, because I didn't realize it initially that my team, I wasn't their boss. They were my boss. It's a whole different dynamic. So in your leadership journeys, how long did it take for you to realize that your team was pretty much really your boss? No? Because if you're a bad leader, your team can actually get you fired. Think about that, right? But nobody tells you that. So let's continue on. And these are questions, remember, this is kind of geared for new leaders. As you're spotting those people on your teams, or whether they're a young leader and you're moving up to a higher position, or whether you're a brand new person, bringing a brand new person into their first leadership role, these are some questions to consider, right? Sit down and have a discussion. My favorite is, do you ask why? How many folks ask why? Do you do it all the time? Yeah. How long did it take you before? Did you always ask why, or did it take a while before you realized I need to start asking why? We're born asking why. How many folks have kids? What do they ask you? Why? I need you to do this. Why? Eat your broccoli. Why? I don't like it. Why? Right? And so we're born asking it, right? And as human beings, we all want to know why. But there's great purpose behind that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So when anybody asks you why in your organization, never challenge it. Tell them. The why is so important. The why is what drives us to do things. This is reality. And hopefully it's not in your organization, but across America, this is reality. So those first-time leaders, oh my God. And so you have a rising star, you've promoted them, you've given them no help, and they leave, or they get fired, right? Because if you're promoted and it doesn't work out, you don't want to stay in that organization, right? There's no future in your mind. And so you leave. And so in America, companies are driving out their best performers because they don't give them help. And think of that brain drain. And so if that's happening, think about, is that happening in your hospitals? Are you losing your best talent and you don't even know it before you get to realize their full potential over their careers? Think about the nurses, that star nurse who's now becomes a shift manager. Are they struggling? Have they been prepared? And so you lose nurses, doctors. Doctors are brilliant, brilliant people. They're the 1% of the 1% of the population intelligence. They come out of med school, and I know you're very familiar with that, and it's a very competitive environment, but they learn zero. They have zero leadership training. And so you can have a great physician, but they can be maybe horrible leaders and horrible people. Right? We all have, right? Exactly. But when you bring them in, when you onboard them into your institution, does your chief medical officer, does they have a program? Does she have a program? Does he have a program that says, you're coming aboard, but you're going to attend this training session. I'm going to help. If you're going to be part of the team, I'm going to teach you what you need to be a part of the team. And so think about that throughout your whole organization. Managers account for 70% of employee issues. Guys, raise your hands. That's our fault. That's our fault. And Adam gave you some great tips, right? When you have the 6 globes, humility, respect, appreciation, those are great tools. Use them, because that will help change that curve from us driving away 70% of our employees. Because like, what's the saying? People don't leave organizations. Well, they leave bad bosses, right? So if you have an organization that tolerates bad leaders, right? So this is most of us. I was fortunate from being in the military and received amazing amounts of training and leadership, but this is most of us. You get promoted. So how many folks got promoted to their first position and they got tons of help? Or not? Raise your hand if that was you, right? How many folks they were on the end of the diving board getting pushed off? Congratulations, you're now a supervisor, you're now a manager. Have fun. You know, if you're lucky, you had a good leader above you. It's not always that way. But if you were fortunate, you had a good mentor, a good leader above you who kind of showed you the ropes and guided you along. But that doesn't happen most of the time. But unfortunately, this is a reality as well. And your failure isn't management skills. It's leadership skills. We're all taught management skills. College will teach you management skills, right? But they won't teach you leadership skills. They don't. And so that's the failure. So we go in to that position and we're not aware. So here we go. So it takes both. You got to balance them, and you have to balance them every day. You may have seen some of these, leaders versus managers. My favorites, leaders have followers. And you don't have to be in a formal leadership position to be a leader in your organization. And you all know people like that. So leaders have followers, right? Managers, they rely on their authority to get things done. Now remember, you have to use the balance, but these are kind of the separation, kind of that thinking. So think about that. So as you have leaders underneath you, that not only is it a self-awareness thing to think about, but how about the leaders below you that report to you? How do they interact with their team and other folks within the hospital, right? They rely on their authority, or is it really more of a follow me approach? I'm going to lead the way. Do they inspire? Are they the example? Do they set the example for what they want their members to be, right? Their team members to be. And do they shape culture? It's interesting. You can go into an organization that has a bad culture. You can be a manager of a department, and you might be, but your boss might be a total a-hole. But that doesn't mean your department has to be one. So leaders drive culture. You can have a different culture than your organization if it's not the culture that's healthy enough. So do you know that, and do your managers know that? Right? So think about that. And so that's the difference between thinking as a leader rather than following culture. All the managers are hard butts. I'm going to be one too. Right? It doesn't have to be that way. The other key thing about a leader is always inspiring their team to be better on a team level and on an individual level. They're not telling them to be better, not whipping them to be better. You're inspiring them. And we'll get into a little bit later on how you do that. So inspire, right? Everybody wants to be inspired. Hopefully the leader of your organization, the CEO, the CFO, hopefully they inspire, right? Hopefully they do that. Because when you're inspired to do something, you want to do it. You don't need to be told to do it. So if there's a vision that they're presenting and and you're on board and you're excited about it, you're going to work those extra hours just because you want to. So inspiration's huge. Leader creates a circle of influence. Managers rely on the circle of power. Do you know anybody in your organization like that? They rely on the circle of power more than influence? No? Come on, nobody? There's not that one person? Every organization has that one. Every organization has that one person. Okay. Investing time in understanding your employees' passions and their values. I know our days are busy and work needs to get done, but how much time as a leader do you spend talking to your teams and talking to the folks, your people that work for you, and not just about their job, but about them and who they are and who they want to be? It takes time. I'm going to jump down to the last one. Leaders focus on generating value but beyond what the team creates. Think about that. And as a manager, you see value as managing people and enforcing established ideas, which is what most people do. Most people do the manager side of it. Let's just get it done and move forward. But we don't necessarily try to inspire our teams to also do something greater. Let's be greater in our department. Right? As a leader, I want to be the leader where people want to come work in my department. Because not only do we do our job, but we're always pushing forward and breaking new ground, and people want to be a part of that excitement. Does anybody have a department in your organization that they're known for that? They're like that, they're the department? No? Is it yours? Who has a department like that? Who runs a department like that? Nobody? Oh, come on. Think about a football team, right? Every department in your organization is like a football team. And I guarantee every leader wants to have the best team. You know, every coach wants to have the best football team, right? And so we're always pushing and we're always striving. That's kind of human nature, especially if you're in a leadership position. And who's that department in your hospital? Anybody? Come on, throw one out. What department is it? What department are you guys in? The billing office? And does the whole organization know that? No. Why not? Wouldn't it be great if the whole organization knew how awesome your culture was and how you were always pushing forward, and then all the new hires would want to come to you? Right? Right? But that's what it's about, right? Be that department. I was fortunate when I moved out of the military and I joined a large hospital management consulting company. I worked for a director. She just got promoted. And it was a small department called Client Services. There's just 3 of us. And her name's Margene Codd. And I was so fortunate. Wonderful lady, wonderful mentor, whip smart. And so the department was to service the needs of the groups that ran the hospitals. Oh gosh. 8 years later, we'd become the Learning Institute. And the Learning Institute was providing and training across the board for about 300 hospitals. And it was amazing, just conferences and road shows and on management and finance and whatnot. So we grew from this little department into this whole Learning Institute. And then we started doing research as well. Has everyone heard of the Advisory Board Company? So we actually started doing that. We partnered with them and we were as well, and we were bringing their research in to augment, and then we're doing our own. And so from this little bitty 3-person department, right, she could have kept it that way. But she goes, no, we're better than that, and we're going to bring value. Isn't that amazing? And that's what I'm talking about. Be that department. And when you want to and you push it and you do it, nobody's going to say no. The leadership's going to go, wow, let that team run. Because they know you're going to do great things and add tremendous value. So that's the inspiration. That's the focus on generating value beyond what your immediate team creates. Okay, so in your leadership role, skills are required. Skills are required. So Stowe and Mead, they're a research duo. They've published in 2020 some of the research in HR Magazine. Interesting, this issue just talked about leadership. They surveyed, oh gosh, I think it was like about 20,000 leaders, 20,000 leaders, and people throughout organizations across America. And they asked them, what do you value? What do you want in a leader? Does number one surprise you? Yep. Communication. And that's probably the hardest thing for us, right? Because we spend a lot of time, we'll talk about that, we spend a lot of time talking, but not a lot of time listening, and we don't always understand that communication goes way beyond just what we say. Where does management fall? Nobody gives a shit. Yes, I know I need to get that report to you. You don't have to tell me. I got it, right? I know. I have a deadline. I know or there's a project we're working on. We know that. That's great. But I need you to do everything else. I don't need you to necessarily manage me because we hire good people, right? We try to hire the best and train them and help them go further and further, correct? So management's not, we don't want management. So everybody in this room, I mean, if we surveyed, it would probably come out very similar, but that's the last thing you want from your boss. It's probably the last thing you need. So isn't that interesting? So that's how important management is. Communication skills, interpersonal skills, values and ethics, personal attributes, coaching, feedback, bring credibility, provide direction and strategy. Aren't those leadership things? Isn't that interesting? So it kind of flips. So why do colleges, when they offer an MBA or a bachelor's in business administration, business management, right? They're teaching you this. Nobody cares. They're skills you need, but at the end of the day, but they don't teach you that. So think about that and bring that back to the table of your organization, and talk about it with your teams. See what they think. See if they concur. Have a conversation about it. It might be actually really interesting. So communication. So 9 out of 10 of us in this room aren't good communicators. We might think we are, but we're not. Right? And we can improve every day. 69% of managers are not comfortable communicating with their team members or their direct reports. Isn't that horrible? That's a lot. They're not comfortable having that conversation. Maybe they're just busy and stressed out, and I don't know. Why do you think that's? Anybody? Do you know managers or employees, or are you guilty of this? I tell you what, when there's a conversation that is going to be a difficult conversation, this is where I fall. I'm not comfortable doing it. I'm going to postpone it. I'm going to procrastinate because it's not fun and it's not easy. And I don't want to have that conversation, right? So we're all guilty of that. But then going beyond that, in everyday communication, when you delegate, how well do you do that? 57% of employees report not being given clear instructions. Isn't that horrible? That's our fault. So if something goes wrong on a project, or we ask somebody to do a task and they fail, before we blame them, we need to look at ourselves. Was it really their fault or was it mine? Because I just wasn't clear, or I thought they understood, but I didn't ask them and make sure they understood, and I didn't check with them along the way. So 7% is verbal. right? So you can just listen to me on a podcast, and that's fine, right? But this 38% is tone and inflection, right? Thank you so much. Thanks. Right? So how do we say it? So when we're nervous or we're angry, that's not when you want to talk to your employees, right? It's not when you want to have a conversation, good or bad. Unless you're excited and it's a great thing to do, and then you want to bring that excitement and that happy body language to the table, correct? But think about it. Sometimes we get stressed, we get angry, and the employee may not have something to do with that. It might have been a bad meeting with your boss. Yes, ma'am.
How much of this has been maybe updated for the virtual workplace where you're not actually communicating a lot now even via Zoom?
Yeah,
Things via Slack or Teams.
it's also new, and it's also new, and the research is not. It takes a while.
Tone in it, we all think all cats is yellow, right?
Yeah.
And millennial, I'm not millennials, Gen Z thinks the period is aggressive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but, and the thumbs up is now aggressive,
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
there's just, it's not
Yeah. Yeah. But so when you go to tone and voice. I mean, think about when you're talking. If you have a conversation, the remote, it's whether your employee likes it or not, doing visual with the voice is really the way to go. And a lot of companies are standardizing that now. And they're saying, no, we're talking one-on-one, you're remote, we're doing video, right? Because you need to see the expression. They need to see your expression, right? Because that helps a lot. That can also explain tone. But think about it also when you're on the phone and when you're talking to somebody. Make it do you smile when you talk on the phone? Because when you do, you can hear it. But when you don't, you're not. And so, it's having that self-awareness about tone. So it's when you're having those conversations without video and even with video. So when you can, always do video. And your younger employees may not like it, but it's that or come in the office. And it's something they have to get used to, and they will. I mean, I guarantee they're videoing with their friends all day long. They just don't want their boss to see it. And so, but if you can mandate that, it'll become it'll get ingrained as part of the culture of the accept, and they'll get comfortable with that. Emotional intelligence. That's one of the biggest keys to communication. Emotional intelligence. You have to have that self-awareness, right? So if you're self-aware, you can self-regulate, right? So you can control your emotions. So you're not going to speak when you're angry or you're frustrated, unless you intentionally your team needs to know that, or whoever you're working with needs to know that. Empathy. Of course, motivation and social skills. And what's important about that is how I feel about. I'll give you an example. How many folks have recently changed their EHR or did an EHR change within the last 5 years? Well, how'd you feel about that? Yeah. Were you excited about it at first?
It's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah. So are you in a leadership position?
Yeah.
So how did you talk to your team about that when giving them the good news?
I was actually over the IT department at that time, and it was a real sobering discussion that there was going to be some long hours that we're going to need people in for this transition.
Yeah. Were there people that were just totally not wanting to do it and not resisting, but
Oh
yeah.
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 The realization of really what was expected of them became very, very real as we.
Was anybody excited?
Yeah, they were. I mean, there was excitement, but I think that the team was probably more fearful than excited.
Yeah.
Everything that was changing.
So that's a big example. But think about that. So I'm gonna put myself in your shoes. And so I might, on my team, I might have employees because I've spent lots of time knowing them, getting to know them personally. I know the ones that are probably going to be excited about it because I'm excited about it. I know it's going to be a lot of hard work, but man, it's going to be so much better for me and the team after all this is done. I'm excited about it. I do not have that exciting conversation. I don't want to bring that to the table to the person who is dreading it with their life and thinking about quitting. Right? And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. And we do it for those of us that have, in your daily lives, your kids are different that way too. I guarantee you talk to your kids different because you use that emotional intelligence, right? And you do it with your spouses, your brothers, your sisters, your mom, right? Your dad. You talk to your mom probably different than you talk to your dad, right? But sometimes at work, we forget to do that. And it's kind of ready. I'm going to call everybody in for a team meeting, and I'm going to give them the great news. But we don't. So we're not always conscious about moderating that and go, okay, I need to talk to Joe this way. So you have to bring that multi-dynamic discussion, that communication, which goes back to those slides. My boss is a bad communicator. So a lot of it's emotional intelligence. And so that's something to read up on, kind of study a little bit. It's not hard. It's just, like Adam said earlier, none of it's rocket science, and it's all out there. It's just taking the effort to go, let me think about this first. Yeah. If there's one takeaway, this is the takeaway. So we need to all become better communicators, right? And the reason we're spending so much time on communication, because it's the number one thing. It's the worst thing we're at do. It's our worst skill statistically, and it's also the thing that everybody want their leaders to have. That was the number one. So communication, right? Become an active listener, right? And what that means is listen not to hear, but listen to truly understand. And we need to help our employees do that as well. So when we assign that project and we think that employee has it and they understand it, and they end up not, and the project's going sideways, right? Did they understand me? Do they know how to ask? And do I know how to ask so that I know they understand? And do they know that they're allowed to ask so they understand, right? It's just not giving a directive. We need you to do this. Right? It's not like, it's not like my mom told me, John, go clean up your room, right? Why? That would not went well. But if she would have said, but if as a parent you say why, and you say it often enough, eventually one day one day I just started cleaning up my room. I finally got it. But we do that with employees too, right? So ask why, but communicate to make sure you're understood and that you understand your employees. Be approachable, authentic, and personable, right? How many here have offices? You have a door in your office? How many keep it closed all the time? Do you know it? There are a lot of, outside of healthcare, it's very common. Manager will walk in their office, they'll close the door. They might be working hard, they might not be. Door's closed, you're not available, right? When somebody comes into your office and they need to talk with you and you're just too busy, they're probably not going to want to come in your office, and you'll get the reputation of, man, it better be something really good because I just can't ask, right? And it happens a lot. So be approachable, be personable, be yourself, be authentic. Be truthful, honest, and transparent. This could be a struggle, especially outside of healthcare. If the company is asking a department or a group of departments to do something, as a manager, you might have information that you're not privy to share completely, and you have to walk that line. How do you do that? Right? Or maybe you're in a hospital and you go, you know what, and maybe you have departments underneath you, and you're going to have to close the service line. But you can't tell everybody that just blatant out front. It's too early. But you got to get people start getting things prepared and moving. So how do you have that conversation? and be honest and transparent. Anybody ever had to do that? No? Has anybody ever been the victim of that? But think about that from a position of the position your boss is placed in as well. It's just, so that's a dynamic, and that's a struggle to always think about. So how do you always be as honest and transparent and clear as possible with your employees? Because that's trust, right? Trust is based on that. And, and do you say, I have other information, but I just, at this point, I am not allowed to tell you I do. But if you can give them reassurances, do that. If they need to get prepared to do something different, tell them. I mean, you're not telling what's happening, but prepare them. Be honest. And they will appreciate that. And if they end up leaving the organization because of a downsizing or something like that, they will always respect you, and they always will trust you. And because at the end of the day, that's what you want, you as a person, right? So always communicate in real time, do it frequently, and be specific about it. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Right? We're all busy, so we spend a lot of time half listening. So communicate, communicate, communicate. Those are on the side. Those are just things to think about as you're communicating. Physical barriers, remote workers. Attitude barriers, emotional barriers, cultural, language, etc. Feedback. Those are all things to think about when I'm having a conversation or I need to have a conversation. Just look at that real quick and go, okay, how do I frame this in my mind? Take those extra 30 seconds, that extra minute before you make that phone call or you have that meeting. We don't do it. We just rush into the meeting, right? But how sharp would you appear if you came to the table? Whether it's a team meeting or you're being pulled up in the meeting, and before that meeting, you spent that extra few minutes and you looked at that list and you came prepared. People go, wow, that person's, they're sharp, right? And you might not be the senior leader in the room, but you might be informally. And that's how you get promoted. How many of us in the room spend time making sure our team is heard and that their opinions and thoughts are validated? Mm-hmm. It's important, right? I learned that. That's one of the first things I learned in the military sergeant school, because when you find out that your peers are rating you and you're a team member and a leader, depending on when the sergeant decides to throw you into those roles, and you're unprepared, it's wow. So, in the military, I think there's a myth about the military that I give the orders and you do what I say. It is the total opposite of that. It's 180 degrees, black and white. As a sergeant and then as a junior officer, I never made decisions without my team's full input. And then I would end up making the decision and be responsible for that, but I tried to get consensus. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to have to do this together, right? And so that's the most powerful thing you can do. And like Adam said earlier, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the ideas. And what comes out of that, right? And so always engage your team, and they are make them the part of every decision process, projects, tasks, whatever. Get full engagement. Foster a we culture, right? We need to do this. Unless it's a failure. If it fails, I'm responsible, right? But everything else is we. We need to do this. We need to do this. Why did we fail? Why did, so it's always we, not I. Leaders are we, managers are I. Visibility. Emails are not enough. Goes back to remote working as well. So when you're in a on-site environment, all right, do you email your colleague down the hallway, or do you just have that conversation as a leader? Right? Do you go? I mean, there's how do you? Who has a boss in here? Everybody have a boss? What does it feel like when your boss comes just to visit with you? Is it terrifying or is it awesome? So, it depends. But look, tell me this: when you see a senior executive of the organization walking around, chatting, saying hi, stop by, say hi to you. How does that make you feel? Right? You go, wow, the boss, that was cool. They took their time out of their busy day, because I know they're super busy, just to say hi and thank me or whatever. That's called visual communication, right? And as leaders, we get so busy, we get stuck in our offices, we shoot off an email. Hey, go out and have that conversation. Walk down 2 floors to go visit the HR department or IT department or whoever you need to talk to, and just say, hey, you got a minute? I just want to say thank you and appreciate it, and I need this. Right? You totally get that, right? IT, but it's so important, and we forget to do that with email. But also for our remote workers, it's the same thing. Don't send them an email. Just invite them to a quick Zoom meeting and say, hey, just want to touch base. How are you? We haven't talked in a week. I know you're getting all these emails. I got this project coming. I just want to touch base with you. It's been a few minutes. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to add, because we have so much virtual going on, one thing that I've done, I can't always pull everybody off to do a quick hi. So I was thinking to training a little video in the morning, just that I send out to the team. They still see my face, right? You're talking about my body language and all that. It's just a little quick way for them to see that I'm still connecting. So, if you're doing a lot of virtual, you take advantage of recording yourself. I know we hate it. Just one way of saying it. How do you say it? Well, because we're internal, I just Zoom it, right? We're actually using the Zoom chat. It pops up in their thing. We have a little video message.
That's a wonderful idea. Yeah, think about that. Anybody else do something like that? That's really cool. So think about, how would you feel if you got that message? All of a sudden, your boss's picture pops up, and you get the Zoom check. Hey, good morning. Just want to touch base with everybody. I know I've been busy, and I want to reach out, and whatever that message is. You would kind of go, oh, that's cool. That's a great idea. Yeah. I'll quit. I don't know what you mean. But you know what? And even if they do, I guarantee they appreciate the effort. I guarantee it. So think about that. That's a great. But it goes back to get out of our offices, walk around, be seen. It has such a huge impact. And when the CEO or CFO or CMO or whoever walks around, that you have that same kind of impact on your people and other folks in the organization too. And it's not just your team. It's other departments that you might work with. Just walk around. Initiate the tough conversations, right? Who's had to initiate a tough conversation? Oh, come on, we all have, right? Anybody want to volunteer and just give an example? Good, bad, what went wrong, what went well? No? Oh, come on. We're not going to judge. No?
I would say that I do always, because I try to be a really just happy, amicable person in general, and then I feel like when I have to say the things that are not happy and amicable, like that I'm changing who I am to that person, or they're not expecting me to say something that's not the warm and fuzzy thing anymore. So I think I feel self-conscious about that sometimes.
We've all had them. It's difficult, right? And did you prepare? You prepare before you have those conversations? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's tough, and it goes back to knowing who that person is and using emotional intelligence, even though it might be a bad message. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Let's just keep going on. So communication. I'm going to go over this. Well, we're going to pretty much skip it, but just don't do any of these, right? Don't be these people. Sometimes we are, right? But try not to be these kind of communicators. Just don't not communicate. Just keep your door closed. I'm too busy. You don't want to be, ambiguous. You just want to say something. People are going, what? Huh? You don't talk word salad, right? The over communicator, you're constantly making calls and emailing your team, like they're getting a gazillion emails from you every day. It's like, leave them alone, right? Give them some space. You don't want to over communicate, a sidestepper, so you're avoiding everything. The jargonist, when you talk, you're using just full healthcare jargon. Some people may not understand that, so try not to do that. These are pretty much self-explanatory. So, yeah, just try to avoid those styles and have that self-awareness. Self-management, right? You can't be a leader if you can't self-lead yourself, correct? And think about this. So, this is pretty much a three-legged stool. Take one of them away, what happens? Think about that, right? Can you self-regulate and self-motivate if you're not even self-aware of your strengths, your weaknesses, why you like to procrastinate, when do you do it, when don't you do it, right? What do you like, what do you fear, what do you enjoy? The same thing. And if you have self-awareness, self-motivation, but you don't self-regulate, so you make knee-jerk reactions, right? You're always in the moment, your emotions take over. If you're self-aware and self-regulate, but you can't motivate yourself, you get nothing done. So it's kind of a great tool. It's actually kind of, and this is something that if you're trying to build a high-performing team, maybe you talk about this as a team. Throw the graphic down, But let's talk about this. What does it mean to you? And help your team start to self-identify. And help them, give them that skill. Because if you can build each of your team members into leaders, as a leader, that's the best thing you can do is not have to lead your department, right? That's the whole goal. And then you're showing the people above you, that team doesn't need you anymore. That doesn't mean you're getting fired. That means you're moving up, right? To bigger and better challenges so you can create more and more high-performing teams. Delegating. Everybody here delegates, correct? Or has been given a task, correct? We do both as leaders, correct? Right? We delegate out and we get delegated too. So I think the top is one of the most important. And I'm actually mentoring a COO of a large consulting company, healthcare consulting company right now. And delegation is a big challenge for this person, and they're very successful. And so we have conversations around delegating, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, when and why, and then how do you really do it well? Right? So so delegating, we delegate to free up our time so we can do leadership things, but we also delegate to build those high-performing teams and those individuals. And so when we delegate those tasks, do you have that conversation of why it's important to you and why am I giving you this task to do? Why is it important for you professionally, personally? Why is it important to the team? Why is it important to the organization? Rather than just I just need you to do this. Just do it. Do you spend the time and have that why conversation? Because if you told me that, wow, John, I need you to be a part of this team, or I need you to do this task, and it's going to increase your value into the organization, and it's going to build you and put you on a pathway potentially to a leadership position or a better position. You're going to gain new skills. You're going to meet more people in the organization that you haven't worked with before. People are going to get to know you. I'm going, that's okay. That's worth more work for me. I'll do that. I'll volunteer. Because now, right, make it important to me. And so when you delegate, that is so important. And so it's how you delegate, right? Because now, rather than using the manager approach to delegation, just here it is, no, you're influencing me, right? Now you're wanting me to do it, not telling me to do it. I want to do it now. And that's the key. And if you do this, and you do this with everybody on your team, whether they're just in a leader position or not, you're going to build a high-performing organization. But it takes the time to ask why, and tell why. Of course, you have to be very, very clear about expectations and outcomes, right? We all need the goal to chase, right? So if we're a football team, what's our goal? Go Super Bowl, win, correct? So make it very clear. Not we just want to go to the playoffs and it doesn't matter after that. So what is that expectation? Because that way you set those expectations and they know what to achieve even when you're gone and even when you're not involved. Create a culture of trust and accountability. That means you have their backs, right? And their failure is really your failure. And their success is their success. So you have their backs because you're trusting them and trusting them to do something, and maybe something they haven't done before. So what Adam said earlier, create an environment where you can learn. It's okay to fail, but be there and guide them along the way. And when you delegate, don't necessarily expect them to do it the way you would do it. Let them come up with the way to do it. Unless you see they're going off a track where they potentially will fail, don't tell them to stop. And share your experience why you think that's going to happen. And let them have that discussion with you or with themselves and have them come back. And I guarantee you might know a great way to do it, but they might come up with even a better way. So, but you have to trust them. And if it doesn't work out and you're on board with that risk, take the hit. Boss, I'm sorry, it didn't work out. We tried something different. It's on me. All right? And that's a hard conversation to have with your boss, is it not? But if the boss has that same mentality and the organization has that same mentality, again, you're going to lead to being high-performing teams in an organization. Rehearse your delegation discussions, right? Even it's no different than having that crucial conversation. Practice it. Write it down. Know what you're going to say. Expectations. How you're going to influence everything. All right. And of course, recognize and celebrate those contributions. And so if you have a large project, when you have a large project, everybody builds in milestones along the way, correct? And you celebrate them, right? Absolutely. Celebrate every milestone. So remember, this was for new leaders. So as we're talking about this, and I know you're all experienced leaders in here, but think about all of this from the aspect of, do my folks underneath me know this? And how do I deliver all this messages to them? One, it makes you now, they're going to hold you accountable to be a better leader, but they're also going to understand, and with this information, they're going to grow into being a good leader, and with your guidance. So think about, how do you bring this down to your organization? Delegating. When I personally first started to delegate, I didn't want to be left out of the fun. There were projects there were things I wanted to do, even though it wasn't necessary for me to be on that team. And that's the hard one, right? That's the hard one for us to let go. But sometimes we need to do it. And sometimes when you delegate, we talked about a little bit about this, things can slow down, right? This is something that's new to the team. You might have all the answers and you might know how to do it, but now you need to grow your team. So delegating is a growth tool for your teams. So when there's a programming project coming up, and Joe and Ann have never done it before, but I'm going to give them the task. It's going to take an extra week for a 2-week, what should have been a 2-week project. Do you do that? It's going to slow it down. But then what do you get after that? Right? You get awesomeness, right? So that's delegating. So who's a micromanager? Who used to be a micromanager? Anybody used to be a micromanager? Oh, come on. The first time I delegated, when I was, great example. So I was OCS. So OCS is about 3.5 months of hell. And and again, your peers are rating you, and you're learning how to. You go to OCS. It's a very hard process. Again, Officer Candidate School, Army. It's a very hard process to even get into. You have to be a sergeant or higher to even apply. And you have to bring leadership skills to the table. So the whole point of the school is just to get rid of you, and find failure in leadership, and get rid of you. And so it's pretty mentally grueling, it's you lose weight, you never have enough to eat, and you're always tired. Yes, and when I went to OCS, I actually learned how to sleep with my eyes open. You can do it. And there are many times, I don't know if you've ever been this tired, but it's so much just deprivation of food. We all lost tremendous amounts of weight, and also deprivation in sleep, which is not good mentally. But they're putting you under extreme stress because they're trying to simulate like combat environment, even though you may not be in one, to see how well you function. And so anyway, yeah. And so there are many times when we were sitting, in formation, and you fall asleep standing up, and you catch yourself like that, right? So yeah, but anyway, so in OCS, again, you're given tasks, you're given different leadership positions. You never know when it's going to happen. But one of the things, we had just come back from a field exercise, and I was given the task of getting all the gear back in, getting it all clean. We're all dead tired because we've been up for days, and I was just miserable. And so I started micromanaging and barking orders, right? And I didn't even know I was doing it. And so one of my buddies pulls me over. He goes, John, he goes, dude. He said, and he told me what I was doing. And I was like, oh my God, I did not know. So sometimes we micromanage and we don't even realize it. And it's because of the environment we're put in, or we're under so much stress and we have so much other going on, right? And sometimes we do with our kids. They're running around, they're driving me crazy, and I got all this, just stop. All right? It's kind of similar reaction. So hopefully none of us micromanage, but I did it initially early, and I had some awakening moments which prevented that. But sometimes people micromanage because they don't trust their team, or they're insecure about the results, and they're afraid of failure, and they don't know how to manage that. And so look for that in your organization. Do you have folks that are always leaders that are over-involved with their employees? Do you have a department that's always churning employees and doesn't seem to keep them? And that doesn't mean they're keeping them because they're going somewhere else in the organization, moving up, but they're going out. Do they not stay there? Because chances are they're being micromanaged, or is one of the things. But look for that. First 90 days. This is something that I learned through just moving around organizations a little bit. When you come aboard an organization or you get promoted into a new position, your onboarding is like HR and kind of stuff, but nobody actually teaches you how to really onboard yourself in the organization, right? You have to do it yourself, right? So when you came to your organization you're at now, did you onboard yourself? And so this is kind of what this is about. So the first week, whether you have one team or you have multiple teams, it's an introduction meeting. Everybody wants to know who the new boss is, right? Anybody do that? First week, hey, here I am. A lot of people don't do that the first week. And so it might, they see you around, you might introduce yourself, but you don't come in and do that. I had one of the companies I worked with, new boss. We had a new executive come in, and the company made a kind of a policy, and when a new executive would come in, they held a reception they would close business at 4 o'clock, and 4 to 6 they had a reception, wine, beer, and you got to meet and just talk. and meet the person. And they stood up, told who they were, blah, blah, blah. And then that was really cool. That's a great way to do it. Just have that introduction meeting. And so people know, oh, he's nice or she's nice and friendly. And then they become approachable and you kind of get to know them. So it's super important because everybody wants to know who the new leader is, who the new boss is. Check-in meetings with your boss. One of the first things you need to do is have a check-in meeting with your boss. And that means if you're hiring somebody into a leadership position that's now reporting directly to you, or you have somebody lower, it depends on how large your department is, but they need to meet with their boss. Because they need to find, we'll talk about that, because they need to find out what those expectations are, right? So we're going to cover these in more detail. Learn about the organization, understand the financials. How does my role in my department fit into the organization? And how do we contribute, or how could we contribute? Establish check-in meetings with your team members. Of course, you set your expectations, establish individual goals. So check-in meetings with your boss, it's really about understanding what I need to be and what my department needs to do, right? Or where it is now and where does my boss see it going? And do I agree with that? And do we talk about that? You know, and then personally, what are the expectations of my boss of me? Right? And then right? Because that kind of sets up. So basically, when you're coming in an organization, right? This is helping you create that first layer of the plan, right? This is the first layer of the plan. How do we fit in? How are we supposed to contribute? How am I supposed to contribute? Then you have check-in meetings with your staff, right? Those initial check-in meetings. And which environment do you want to have that meeting in as an employee? So think about that. Do you call them in your office? Or do you have that initial one-on-one conversation? Because you're really getting to learn, it's giving them an opportunity to learn about you, but also about them, right? I mean, you can go through the HR files and things like that, but you're looking for, what are their strengths, their skills, what do they like personally? What are their career ambitions? They have kids, not married, not whatnot. So you're really getting to know each other. But because you understand what your goals are from your boss, now you're trying to fill that football team, right? So your boss is saying, you're now the team manager. We need to win the Super Bowl, right? And we need to go to the playoffs, and we only can such and such. And now you're meeting with your team to see what is the skills and the dynamics and how they work together, but you're meeting them one-on-one at first, of that football team. Because you're the new coach, right? You've got to know each and every member on your team. So you can then, so once you understand those skills, now you can put together individual plans for your team members individually, but also your team plan. So think about it like a football coach, right? We don't do that a lot of times. And there are a lot of folks potentially in your organization or working with you or underneath you that they have skills that you have no idea they have, because nobody's asked them. And it might be something that's a passion for them that they could potentially bring to the organization that you have no idea. Do you know all those skills of your team members? And ask them, what do they have to do after hours? I mean, how many people knew I could even rope, right? My boss doesn't know that. So they'll surprise you. So either from an IT perspective or just a person might have this amazing communication skills for patients. You just don't know what they do in the outside world that they can bring to the table. And so check-in meetings, there's some simple rules. Respect the time, make it a safe place, right? Make it a comfortable place. Always ask what you could do and what you could do better when you're having those meetings as well. Because you just don't have one. You need to schedule them continually. Always, what can I do better? How can I support you? And of course, as you know, as leaders, your job is to remove barriers, right? That's your job, not to necessarily do the work, but remove all the barriers so your team can do the work. So remove the barriers. And make career, we've been talking about this, make career development a priority, their career development. Because when your team members or any of your direct reports know that you care about their career and you're investing your time into them to enhance their professional and personal lives, man, that's powerful. You trust somebody like that to do that? If they did that? This person cares about me. And so when you do need to have a conversation about performance or something like that, which you should always do quickly, don't wait till the end of the year, it's much easier to have that conversation because they know you really care. And so they know you're not doing it because you want to push them down with your thumb because you did something. You're a bad boy, you're a bad girl. They're going, man, he's coaching me. He's not berating me, right? And it makes that difficult conversation easier because they're coming at it from a different perspective. I call it building a trust bank, right? So think about a bank. Build the trust bank, build the trust bank, build the trust bank. So when you need to withdraw, man, you've got so much more in there, right? But if you don't spend the time to build that trust bank, the first time you have that negative conversation, they're going, my boss has it in for me, I need to look for another job. And you might be feeling 100% different about that. You might think, I love this employee. They've got so much potential. But they don't know that. So do you spend a lot of time, do you spend that extra time talking about their careers and helping them build a path to fulfill that career? Whether it's in your organization or not. You know, they might be in IT. I'm going to pick on IT. My brother's in IT. I'm going to pick on They might be in IT and go, you know what? And it might be a great program, but you know what? Their aspiration is, I want to change. I want to be a nurse. So what are you going to do? How are you helping them do that? Right? How are you helping them change? And, I want to keep them. I need them. Well, yeah, but they'd be but if their aspiration is to be a nurse, how do you help them get there? Or whatever that desire might be. Yeah, when you have the meetings, unless you need your laptop to show something or talk about, shut off the phones, leave the computers behind. We don't, we all do this too much. Just leave them behind, make them do it, and just have a conversation. Take them to lunch. Have breakfast in the cafeteria. 30 minutes, an hour. Great time to do those little meetings. And, of course, always end on that positive note. So these are just some, I'll just skip kind of through these. But your first check-in meetings, I think one of the most important things as a leader is there's a lot of fear, especially if somebody new coming into the position that nobody knows. The people fear the unexpected, right? They're anxious about it. So kind of set those fears aside, introduce yourself, and just reinforce, the value that you value the team and what your visions are. Always encourage your team members when things feel off. Tell me. So you're being approachable, right? Let them know you're approachable and you want their input, and tell them that I can't succeed. We can't succeed unless you bring these issues to the table. If something's going wrong, you've done something that isn't working. Let me know. This is about we. And be approachable. Because if you have a new boss and they don't say that and you're messing up a little bit or you need help, I don't want my boss to think I'm not doing well, right? Always ask for their support. Always ask for their support. And try to meet at least one. For folks that have large departments, it's impossible. But if you can meet once, but if you have a small team, 5 people, 6 people, try to meet once a month. I mean, there's 20 work days in the month. You have to eat breakfast. You have to eat lunch sometime. It doesn't always have to be at your desk. Break away one day. It's good for you. It's good for them. And your team and your team members might actually become more friends as well. I mean, there's a difference, but there's nothing wrong. They know you're the boss, but having a more collegial, more friend relationship, it actually will enhance that. The comfort level of the team as well. And it also will help you understand maybe some of the dynamics that are working on, that are in the team that you don't, that may be happening that might not be good or bad that you might not even know, because they might bring it up over time. And that's so important. Of course, establish your expectations in going beyond just I expect you to hard work and blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. They're like blah, 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 blah. Like Charlie Brown, right? The teacher talking, rah, 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 rah. That's all they hear. That's all I would hear. Tell me something real. You know, and these are some suggestions. You know, the communication preferences. How to let them, ask them, how do you like to be communicated? Do you want me to call you, visit you in person? Do you prefer email first? Do you want me to text you? Here's how I like to be. Don't text me or call me. You come into my office first, So understand that with each of your team members and set those expectations as well and understanding. So because if they know how you like to be communicated, if I'm emailing you all the time, you hate it and you never told me. Right? You go, God, John, why does John always do that? Why does he just come into my office? And I'm thinking, I prefer that way, but I didn't know you preferred that way. Right? So do you do that? Do you know? And then open that conversation up down the road, and maybe you have a short meeting with your team, and say, and ask everybody, each one. So does your team know how they should be communicating to each other?
Issue, or I don't know if it's a problem, but that I see in especially mid-level managers is delivering bad news. So when I've got staff that maybe aren't meeting their expectations and they get formally evaluated twice a year, they're getting feedback throughout the year, and the mid-level managers act as their coaches, and they'll be saying, yes, I talked to them about this issue and about what they've been doing on these jobs and some things to improve. But when it comes to the semi-evaluation period, they're like, oh, nobody ever told me about this, because the communication style is slightly off, or the mid-level manager is really basically burying the bad news in all this, oh, well, a lot of people have issues with this and that and whatever, and isn't really delivering that one piece of information that person needs to improve. So that's what I see more than anything else, is the fear to deliver bad news, and how do you get that message across and help that individual improve their performance.
Yeah.
Because that seems to always be a surprise when the evaluation periods come up. Is like, well, nobody's talked to me about this, but my mid-level manager will swear that they've been talking about this with them every month.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so hopefully those mid-level managers, who if you're over them or whoever's over them, you notice that, you kind of bring them up and say, hey, it becomes a coaching moment, right? It's like help them understand how to do it and appropriately, and give them guidelines and help them build that trust and that capacity, so that they're comfortable. You're never really comfortable having those conversations, but when they have them. So what's the company policy on how to do it? So when somebody's not doing something or meeting expectations, of course you should always do it pretty much as quick as possible. Don't wait, right? And so and always, oh gosh, nobody ever should be put on a performance improvement plan. Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate if it gets there. That means the manager has failed, right, at some point. And so I would ask the manager, how did it even get to the point where it's even reaching the report? What are they not doing, or what do they think they're doing but it's not working, to engage that person and make that correction? Are they giving them extra skills, the extra training? What are they bringing to the table to help that person get over that bump? Or are they asking somebody to do something that's not even really in their skill set, and it's not their strength? And they're asking, don't ask me to do accounting. Don't ask me to program something. You're not, I'm going to fail. So do you have the right people? Do they have the right people doing the right things to begin with? And and if that person, whatever that issue might be that they're struggling to overcome, are they being partnered up with somebody who is good at that and they do it together? So what are all the things that they're not doing? So as a leader, that becomes our job. It's not necessarily the employee first. We look at ourselves first and our processes first, the employee last. And so are we doing everything we can do that's correct to help that employee, right? So if they are in the right position, they do have the skills, they are getting all the training, they're getting partnering up, whatever we do, and it's still not working out, that's a different issue, right? This person may not fit any longer in this department. But, I think it's easy for, I've talked to Joe, I've talked to John about this, I mentioned it, don't stop doing that, you're not doing this correctly or whatnot, or I'm almost, fixing it. But if I'm not providing those solutions and actively engaging and helping that person grow professionally, which is our job, then I'm failing as a manager. And so my recommendation is talk to the manager and find out. So what's going on? And you might think you're communicating, so you're telling them, that's fine. But if you just tell me to get better and you don't give me the tools to get better, the resources to get better, you don't love me enough to do that, then how am I going to get better? And so it's a different way to look at it, right? So you might have to have that conversation, a difficult conversation, or whoever their boss is, to that middle manager. And if you have that across the board, there's a lot of training that needs to potentially go on with that cohort. And, so it might be a training one where you bring all these middle managers together for half a day and do some specific training, just as, quote, middle management training, then, on a certain subject. You don't have to necessarily pull them out, initially. But if they get that training and they can continue to do it, then so there's different ways to look at it, but it kind of goes back to the early slide. We promote people up and we don't give them the leadership training and the leadership skills so they can be self-aware. Have those managers, have they received, lots of leadership training and?
Yeah, in my company, after 3 years or 4, you start moving into those leadership positions, and so there's always a new crop of individuals learning, and I think just naturally with the type of personalities we get, people have a hard time delivering bad news, whether it's to clients or to staff, on how things are going. So they'll think they're doing it, but they're not getting that message across. They're always couching it with other language that seems a lot more positive. So we're always working with them to be a little more blunt and clear, because that's always the part I'm about, is just be very clear, but be compassionate and be understanding, but make sure you make that statement instead of couching it in all this other language.
Because I agree with you. Nobody likes to deliver bad news, but it's when we deliver that, are we bringing solutions to the table, right? So if we're having a problem in my company with a client and something's not going right, and it's, we have that conversation to figure out what's going on and bring a solution to the table, right? And so it's no different. But if they realize that conversation, I guess the question is, how do you help them realize that's actually a good conversation to have? And there's actually so much positive that comes out of it. Whether it's a client or an employee, because the employee might not be a good fit and they might realize they're not a good fit. And then and they might self-select to go, I'm just not right for this department or this company. So I know it's tough. It's tough, but you have to give them those. If you've given them the skills, I don't know. So enforce your expectations, right? So you set them. Your predecessor had expectations. Now you're coming in. Your boss is giving you expectations. Now you have to set those expectations, right? It's through influence, right? It's through building trust. If you have to intimidate and flex power to enforce your expectations, and you've done everything right, then it's a fail, right? Now, if you've done everything right, then that's an employee issue. So, it kind of gets to, Tony, what you're talking about. I mean, your company has those expectations and they have to meet those expectations. And if they're not meeting them, then you have to have that conversation. So we talked about this, develop team and individual goals. Do you guys schedule regular meetings with your team just to get feedback? You say, hey, you know, maybe it's a monthly meeting. How are we doing as a team? What's working? What's not working? Awesome. Tips on overcoming your predecessor legacy. Communication, right? That's one of my favorites. But that also says a lot about the culture of that company. Think about that. He thought it was okay, right? That was Dilbert's assumption because that culture was the way it is. So, yeah, I just a little double-edged there. So when you're coming into, whether you get promoted up within a department or especially when you're coming in from a different department or outside the organization, you know, try and find out why that position was open. The person get fired, they get promoted. You know, what's the reason? Right? You know, was there your predecessor? Was there a lot of loyalty behind them? You know, do you know anybody in that organization? Find out as much as you can. You know, because you know, who was that person that you're replacing? The power of first impressions. You know, as a leader, it's just not that the job interview, it's not their first day or it's not our first week. It lasts for months. It lasts for months. And this is pretty much think of lead by example. And you've got to do it all the time, right? So, you know, so if the doctor's showing up on his first, you know, his first day at the hospital, and he shows up on the right side, not only are the patients going to have a wonder what's going on, but so is everybody else in the hospital, right? So those first impressions. Now, if that doctor's your top surgeon or neurosurgeon or whatnot, and he's been a star for the last 10 years, and he shows up to work one day like that, nobody's going to care. Not really, right? So those first impressions are so powerful. And sometimes we forget that. And especially this is something that, you know, new. So everything we do, our words are one thing, our actions are gold. And so as for new leaders, I mean, they've got to realize all eyes are on them. Everybody's eyes are on them. From your eyes, the people that report to them, other people in the organization, right? So everybody's eyes are on them always. So it's you know, that first month after you come into an organization, you kind of slack down a little bit. But they need to, I think, you know, realize you can't. You've got to put several months behind your belt to do that. Okay. Let's see. Getting perspective. When you come into the new organization, it's having those conversations with your employees. And we talked about this a little bit because it's all about gaining perspective too, right? You have your assumptions coming in, and then you have reality. And so use your team to gain perspective. Your boss might want you to do something. You know, they set their expectations of you and the team. What's your team's expectations? And blend them together, you know, gain perspective is real important. Because it's easy to come in and my boss wants me to do this, he needs his department to do this, he wants me to be accountable a certain way, and my team, we're just going to do it. So gain that perspective. Where's your team sitting and where are they aboard and how far? Is your predecessor your boss? Do they get moved up? That's you know, that could be an interesting dynamic too, right? So what are their expectations and, you know, and how did your team how did your team feel about that person? They might have been a good boss, a mediocre boss, a horrible boss. How do you find out? What's important? And then how do you balance that? So it's just gaining perspective. A fresh start, right? It's a new leader coming in. It's always a new beginning, right? It's a chance to get with the team, get rid of the old, bring new ideas in. Right? It's a great reset for a team too, especially if they're not functioning well together. It's a wonderful opportunity to say, guys, this is a reset. Right? That's powerful. So every new leader should do that. They should reset. Even if it's going great, you need to reset because we can even do better. And your team will tell you how. Right? Like Adam said, just ask them. They'll tell you. Right? It's so simple. But we think as leaders, especially as new leaders, we're supposed to have all the answers. But now that we know better than that now. Okay, make it clear that your feedback, and okay, we've done that. Okay. It talks about the trust bank. So that's how you build trust. You break any one of those, you lose trust. All right? Goes back to the myth in the military. You can't, when the bullets are actually flying, you can't order anybody to do that. Right? And you don't do for somebody you don't like. Right? Who do you do that for? You do for family. You do to somebody you love. So people don't realize that about the military. You were given all this training so we could develop those teams. And it's an expectation. You've heard, we never leave a soldier behind. But you can't make somebody do that. Which one's an officer? Which one's a private? Which one's a sergeant? You have no idea. You just do it, right? So that's where you want your team to be from trust. You have their back, they have your back. Right? And if there's a massive failure in a team and your boss is ripping you a new one, your team's pulling you to safety. So that's what it's about. So how do you get there? And it's simple. That's it. But it takes time. It takes trust. Ethics, great book. Recommend to read it. Share it with any of you new team members. Fantastic. This is a conversation to have with people, especially that you're thinking about moving them up into a leadership position. Just ask them these questions, right? Before if they're being considered being promoted, just informally meet. Start asking questions. These are some good questions to ask. Are they making rash and emotional decisions? So these are triggers to lead you down. These are triggers that can lead you to violating ethics, right? So making rash emotional decisions. Pressure creates tension, right? Will I have time? Will I have a hard time in such situations to make poor decisions? How can I guard against that? Anybody ever ask you that in an interview question? Wouldn't that be awesome? I would hate it. But as an interviewee, hiring a manager, that's a question I'm going to ask them. Has anybody ever been asked any of these questions in an interview? Going into a leadership position? Looking at those? Would you like to ask those questions if anybody coming up? Yeah, right? Because you kind of know who you're getting, right? Especially in healthcare. Compromise the truth. Am I willing to stick to the truth even when I don't like it? Take shortcuts? Am I going to compromise? Right? Not keeping your commitments kind of ties along with not making promises, and about other opinions when it isn't right, but the pressure's there. That happens a lot. So, are you going to, are you not going to follow along a decision when you know it's not right, and by not following along, you might lose your job? Are they willing to say, no, I'm not going to jail? That'll harm the patient. I'm not going to do that. Think about that. So when you're looking at those new leaders, potential new leaders, these are questions to ask. Forget give me a time and blah, 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 blah. No. These are the questions. You like them, don't like them? No? Yeah, it's a great book. So, I recommend, any new leader that you hire, buy them a book, buy them an $8 book. It is so worth it. Andy Reid. There was an article. It's the slides. There's a link underneath his name. The article's a couple years old, before the last Super Bowl. Just take a moment and read what the team says. These are the players, and these were like unsolicited comments. The reporter met with team members and just asked them about Andy Reid, and look what they've said. He's everything you want in a coach. Each Friday during the season, the linemen get to play wide receiver. Think about that. Who does that? But he knows, Andy Reid knows each of his players, and he knows their passions, and he knows he knows the linemen want to have fun sometimes, right? And how much, come on, the receivers, they get so much glory, right? But they get to have fun, and Mahomes is throwing them passes. Right? And they're having fun together, and they're doing something they want to do. But think about it this way, and think of the genius about this. So you're catching passes from John Mahone on Fridays, and you're on the line. Now it's game time. Mahone's behind me. I'm going to fight a little bit harder because our bond's stronger. So think about, how do you have fun with your team and let them do things that you wouldn't even think about letting them do, even if it's work, to build that team stronger. I think it's pretty incredible. He did everything he told us he would do. That's what everybody loved. And the first thing he said is, all right, what gripes do you have? Most of the things we brought to him, he trusted just like that. That's pretty powerful. So it's a great article. Those are just excerpts. But it's something also to share with potential new leaders. It's really about. There's some summary slides, but I'll pass those through. But the message to this is: be a coach most of the time, be a leader some of the time. Right? There's no doubt Andy Reid's the leader of that team. There's no doubt. But he's a coach first. Coaching is about people, about caring. And then be a leader second. Okay, we'll forget. You guys all know these. And you know these as well. And that's it. Thoughts? All right.